Okay, we have started recording. So welcome back to another episode of Diary of an SEO. We're joined by Travis Tallent today, who's the VP of SEO at Brainlabs. He's joining us from Denver, Colorado. We've got Daris, our head of recruitment, and of course, you've got me. But yeah, it's interesting. We've just come back from America. I was there for a month, but unfortunately didn't get to go to Colorado. It's on my bucket list. But Travis, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to the day I get to welcome you in Colorado.
Yeah, you shouldn't say that because I'll book a flight next week. I've got a problem with booking flights. But yeah, Travis, you're the VP of SEO at Brainlabs. Brainlabs is one of the biggest media agencies in the world. They're absolutely humongous. Could you give us a brief summary of, well, where did you start and how did you become VP of SEO at Brainlabs?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey started back in college when I created a universal scholarship application platform that stitched up students and organizations. And that search engine that was built was, in essence, an index and a database and so on and so forth. I didn't realize it at the time that SEO even existed, but somehow I built a scholarship search engine, right? After college, as most startups go, the team disbanded that was working on that. There's not a ton of money in scholarships, unfortunately. And I started at Wpromote and worked my way up through the chain. And then moved over to Booyah Advertising to launch their organic media department. And then found my way over to Brainlabs as the VP of SEO, leading about 50 people globally of both SEOs and CROs. And it has been an incredible, wild ride. I feel very, very thankful to have been in the industry about a decade and to just see so much change, so many great people who are in this industry that are very much motivated to help people have a better Google and online experience so then they can ultimately find the services and the entertaining things that make life better.
Awesome. And going straight from, but what kind of size was the team before you managed? So the 50 people that you're managing globally now, was it a similar size before that, or was it a lot smaller?
Yeah, great question. So when I was at Wpromote as the associate director of the small media business department and the SEO lead, my role was really to develop process, training, contracts, etc., for that team and scale that across the team. So while my team that I was directly managing was around 4 or 5 people, the influence that I had was quite larger than that. And that was fun, super, super fun. And then going over to Booyah, I was the very first hire for their organic media department. They were historically a paid media agency of about 100 people. And they hired me on to launch this new product, this new team. So it started with just me. Within 3 months' time, we closed our first book of business and then immediately started hiring from there. By the time I left, about 2 years later, we had a team of 7. And that was a much different experience of, going from influencing a team of 40, having, loads of resources, loads of people to bounce ideas off of with other SEO expertise, to basically being the one SEO expert within an agency and needing to be that thought leader to really move things along. And then now, obviously, in my role, we have loads of resources. It's the largest organization I've ever been a part of and worked from. And that has been exceptionally fulfilling because there is someone to help with any challenge you are ultimately going through. Sometimes it takes a while to find them, but if you ask around enough, you will absolutely find someone who can help mentor you on that journey.
Awesome. And before we get into the managing of a team, just a quick one on, so you said you went into Booyah and you were the first SEO there. So we've helped quite a lot of our clients go from they've been working with an SEO agency for, let's say, a year, 2 years, and they want to build an in-house team and they want to start building that. And we bring somebody in, let's say an SEO manager, but the big thing on that is like we need to find somebody that's able to communicate and sell SEO because there hasn't been an SEO team before. So what was your experience in that? Was the rest of the team open to hearing about what you had to say about SEO? Did you have to like learn how to communicate differently? Like what was the experience there?
I'm so glad you brought this up because you are 100% right. The skill set required to do that dramatically changes. And the way you need to communicate it dramatically changes because you're speaking with folks who don't have that context and don't inherently understand or know the value of SEO in a way that an organization that already has SEO would. So I think for me, step number one is to really listen to what the business goals are and make sure that whatever ask you are communicating are aligned with those business goals. For example, if the business goal is to improve the quality of leads, then when you're making an ask for that next content strategist or whatever to join your team, make sure that it's aligned with that strategy that's ultimately going to improve the quality of leads. So that's tip number one that I learned through that process. And then I think tip number two is not to undervalue just building relationships in general. It's so much easier to get to yes when you're friends with the people that you are ultimately asking to work with. And when you're able to build those relationships, break bread with them, have drinks with them, it becomes a lot easier to have those meaningful but tough conversations for what is that next step? How do we grow? So on and so forth.
Perfect. And just to touch on that, Travis, I know you were the first one there. When you did start hiring, what was the process? How did you sort of find the top performers? And did you work from sort of a top down, or did you bring in sort of junior people and help them train up, or did you go with somebody more senior as sort of your first hire?
Yeah, great question. Senior, 100%. And I think part of this is when you are the very first one, you quickly want to get a lieutenant who can really help you scale and operationalize everything. Don't get me wrong. I love hiring brand new folks right out of college and, being able to train them up to become the best SEOs in the world. But when you are a small team, it's really, really important that you have someone you can lean on so then you can continue to scale. At least that's been my experience from an agency perspective. Obviously, if you're a small in-house brand and you maybe don't have budget for 2 senior SEOs, that strategy is different. But I think there's absolutely something to be said of having at least 2 very, very strong people. So then you're able to bounce those ideas off of each other, delegate, so on and so forth.
And just to add on to that, is there any sort of traits that you look for when hiring for that person? And obviously, you've been hiring for quite a while now. Has those traits changed from maybe 10 years ago to what you're looking for now?
Going back to communication, that is number one. I think a good communicator will excel in any job. And to me, that means making sure that the person has what I would call dragon slayer stories that they feel really, really proud of. And they are able to clearly communicate the inputs and the outputs of, what they were able to accomplish. And then 2, it's really the ability to storytell in a compelling way. That's related to communication, but not totally the same. And here's how I would differentiate it. Being able to communicate clearly is more about directness. It's more about being able to have difficult conversations. It's more about not being afraid to speak up when you need to in order to influence any big decisions. Storytelling is more about how do you take something really boring, like organic sessions increases over time. And then you apply a story over that of why is that happening? What is the impact of that? What does that ultimately mean for the broader business? So that's absolutely the number one trait that I always look for. Number two, for me, is really about a willingness to roll up your sleeves and work. And I think no matter what level of hire you're looking for, I always want to find that person who is willing to get their hands dirty, strategize, build new process, make tomorrow better than it is today. And surprisingly, that is a quality that seems to be more challenging to find today than it was previously. And it's still something that I always look for. So those are the two biggest qualities. And then of course comes all of the technical expertise and all of that, but that's pretty easy to suss out in any interview.
I love that. I love the communication bit that you said there. For anybody listening, Andy Holland and Eli Schwartz talk about this a lot. Eli Schwartz has a thing called the Rice Method, but we had him recently on the podcast, and he talked about how he went into a big company and the company owner just didn't like the idea of SEO, right? And he was a growth consultant for them. So Eli found out that the company owner really liked basketball. So he came in and did a presentation with like 20 people in the room. And the presentation was just a GIF of a guy passing the basketball and then the guy taking the basketball and going up and dunking it, right? And he just played it on a loop for like a few minutes and was like looking around at everybody. And he goes, this is what SEO is. SEO is the assist to get you there. It's not the one that's gonna get you dunked. But it was really, really interesting just because that's something that we find as well. It's really hard because we'll get, like, I don't want to put a label on it, but a lot of SEOs are naturally introverts. So it's hard to get them to be able to communicate, talk about all this technical stuff, especially like you, if you were the first guy at Booyah, right? Take all that technical and talk to like C-level suite executives or whatever. Like they're just not it's going to be like one ear out the other. Like, what does it mean? But yeah, I think one thing I wanted to touch on with that is, so we work with 100+ clients from global startups the whole way to Fortune 500 companies. And when we get on calls with like startups or smaller companies, it's like, what they're looking for is just SEO ability. It's like, look, we need the SEO done. That's it. When we talk to bigger companies that have maybe been around for 10, 15, 20 years, it's actually more of a stress on, we want them to be a culture fit. We want them to actually fit into our team. Because like we can go and get the SEO ability and put them through our vetting process, but we want them here for the next year. We want them to be able to motivate and lead, and whatever role it is, obviously it differs, but we want the whole team to go up with each other by putting this person in it. So what kind of way do you, Travis, vet for that then?
Yeah. For me, it's about having a really thorough onboarding, or not onboarding, hiring process. There we go. And in any new organization that I've been a part of, I usually have to basically throw out the old hiring process and build a new one. So what that typically looks like at Brainlabs is us having an initial phone screen and aligning with our HR team. What are the qualities we are ultimately searching for? Who is going to be successful in this role, managing these particular accounts and in this particular industry, so on and so forth, so they can screen candidates appropriately. After that initial phone screen, then comes a technical skills interview, just so we can confirm, like, can this person do the job, right? We're asking about things like robots.txt versus meta robots tags, and what is your site audit process? How do you think of content strategy, so on and so forth. And after that technical skills interview comes really what I would call culture fit interview. And that is really where we're leaning heavily into communication, where we're leaning into project management, where we're leaning into management style. And when you have a robust process like that, it's usually pretty easy after interviewing 4 to 5 people to determine which of those people are the best fit for the org. When you don't have a thorough hiring process like that, you typically end up with a lot of confusion at the end of the hiring process, and a lot of really close candidates together where you're saying, well, they're both great, I could take it either or. When you have a thorough process, it becomes pretty darn clear who is the top candidate at the end of that.
Awesome. And then let's switch it from client side to hiring. So you guys sit on the hiring side, the actual candidate focus. So people showing up to interviews. So Daris has a great story. One of our clients was they're a SaaS business, and we went and found they were hiring for an SEO manager, and 9 of the SEOs had SaaS experience. One of them didn't. Right. And this one was, he was a great SEO, but like the stacks were on these guys' favor. And he showed up to the interview and he shared his screen. He like politely said, do you mind if I just, before we get into this, it was a chemistry call, right? Like a phone screen. He's like, do you mind if I just share my screen? And he just shared his screen and went through. He basically did a mini audit on the site, what he would change, what he would do. And he ended up getting the job, and it was like 15K higher than what he was currently on. And he, like, these guys should have got it type of thing, but he obviously showed the initiative to do that. Has there been any stories across your decade in SEO from your hiring how do people stand out, Travis?
I love that example. And I think that's a very smart thing to do with the right audience. I would not do that in something like the culture fit interview, but I think that could be something beneficial to do in a technical type of interview. So tip number 1, do the research on who is going to be in that interview room, so you really understand what is their role, what are their responsibilities, and try to find ways to have commonality with them. One of the things I've done in any interview I've been a part of is go research that interviewer. And in my case, my current boss, Jeremy Hall, chief product officer, gets loads of interviews, speaks on stages, so on. So I just went to YouTube and watched a few of those, and that was an immediate conversation starter. And then I would say additionally, it doesn't just start at the interview phase. Being able to reach out to other influencers within the org on LinkedIn, engage with their post, send them a message if you're bold enough, that always can get you to stand out in very unique ways. Obviously, be polite. Don't just have it be a boring message. Try to find that commonality. But when you're able to do that, you can really make an impression, even outside of that hiring committee, that can have a positive influence in other ways.
Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned the chatting with other influencers. So that's one thing. We're on calls with, like, we've got a CRM system with a couple thousand SEOs that we've been on phone calls with. And we have this whole blueprint where we say, look, if we don't have a role available now, this is the resource that you can go away and improve your stuff on. And the one thing that I push, my team are sick of me saying, is like building a personal brand. It doesn't, people think personal brand always means business, but it doesn't. It's like posting on LinkedIn, putting up your findings, commenting on people that are at the top in your industry. And I've said it to so many SEOs recently, is like, everybody knows in business that an inbound lead is like 10 times hotter than an outbound cold outreach. So it's the same as if let's say the likes of Eli Schwartz or somebody big in the industry sent you an SEO, Travis, and we're like, look, seeing your role that you're advertising, I can back this guy. Chatted to him for like the last 3 years, right? Like, it may have started off that he was pestering me, but I actually got chatting to him. I like him. Do you want to interview him? So yeah, I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and Eli's great, by the way. I got to meet Eli at SearchLove. We chatted about loads of various SEO challenges and struggles. One of those things that we chatted about is really, how do you find people who can communicate well, but also just like understand the inherent value in SEO. So to that point, even finding influence, once you find that new job, finding influence within the org so then you can advance your initiatives is really, really important. Going back to relationship building and influence, like all of those things tied together. And that's really about creating a culture and being willing to be uncomfortable sometimes, reaching out to that new person, asking for a favor, asking for advice, so on and so forth.
Brilliant. Travis, just before you mentioned about your hiring process and how robust it is at the minute. Obviously, when you're going through sort of large periods of growth and sort of growing out teams, has there ever been a period where those processes, not necessarily just the hiring process, but other sort of operational processes, have you ever sort of outgrew that, and how do you sort of adapt to that and sort of upgrade them as fast as possible?
Yeah, always. I think some of that is embedded in a high growth organization. The scale of which you're doing things has to change as you grow. But I think the other part of that is a lot of this is embedded in the SEO industry itself, because it's always changing. The SOP or the training that was built 2 years ago on keyword research looks very, very different today. The way to really get around this is to build a culture that embraces adaptability and embraces discomfort and is okay with change. And when you're able to build that type of culture, it becomes a lot easier to institute change process, so on and so forth, without it feeling so scary all the time, right? It just becomes a part of the job. The other way I found success is starting with a bottom-up approach and having, even the most junior people contribute to new process and building new trainings and new ways of doing things. Everyone can become an expert in something. And when you are able to build that from the bottom up, it gets people excited because they're able to put their stamp of approval on that particular thing. As the team gets bigger, it's impossible for one person to build all of that process and to lead that change. So that's why a bottom-up approach is something that's a lot more scalable and just a lot more fun. So then you don't get stuck in an office having to do the same thing all the time.
Awesome. I love that you mentioned about building a culture of discomfort. I feel like a lot, especially today, like people try and stay away from that. But I've got a great story on that. So one of our guys, Jay, joined us back in just before June, and he came from a better paying job, all of this big corporate company, and he wanted to join us. And yeah, he basically said that he was too comfortable at that role. He wanted to be uncomfortable. And I asked him on his first week of him starting with us, asked him what makes you most uncomfortable, and he said probably just public speaking. I was like, okay. So after a week, we hosted an event on the 1st of June. We had Nick Eubanks fly over from Miami. We had some great people at it. And I was doing a speech on how to attract A-player SEOs. Daris was giving 5 minutes about the vetting process. And I said to Jay, I was like, why don't you jump on? You've been with us for 2 or 3 months now. You've seen how we invest a lot into our onboarding process. You've seen how we do it. Why don't you speak about onboarding for 5 minutes and what way you've talked to SEOs about that? And he was like, do you mind if I get back to you tomorrow? I was like, yeah. And he was absolutely bricking it. But yeah, I love the discomfort side. And that leads me on to my next bit is onboarding. So again, we're a recruitment company. We can do all the recruitment. We can find you the best people. But if we give you somebody and your onboarding process isn't there, they're gone in 2 or 3 months. Do you know what I mean? So What advice can you give to company owners, agency owners out there to invest into their onboarding and basically get the best out of the SEOs that they do hire?
First impressions matter a lot, always, in a personal setting, in a professional setting. And to your point, Josh, there's a lot of data and research to show that the onboarding process has dramatic influence over employee retention, happiness, so on and so forth, even years down the line. So it's something that at any new org, again, I've rebuilt the onboarding process from the ground up because it's really, really important to me that people have a fantastic first impression at any new org that they join. the other part that's really important about onboarding is making sure everyone is speaking the same language and aware of our ways of working, what tools we have access to, who can be a resource for XYZ challenge. And there isn't a better way of doing that other than a thorough onboarding process. So this was really introduced to me at W Promote when I first started with them. The first 3 months of that job was them training us on SEO, paid search, paid social, account management, all the tools. And that really opened my eyes to what a great onboarding process looks like and how that can dramatically influence a team. And fortunately, being exposed to that, I've been able to replicate something similar to that for SEO in any work from there.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, because we go on about onboarding process all the times to clients because, yeah, as I mentioned, we do all the work this side. You need to get that right. And the way that you said about the science behind how it can affect years on, the way I look at it is there's a book called Scaling Up, How to Master the Rockefeller Habits. Great book. It's like a business textbook. And it talks about that. And it basically talks about how it's like a honeymoon period. Or another example is you remember your first day of school, who was nice to you. You remember like what kind of environment you were in, which then shaped the way that you looked at the company or school or whatever. But yeah, Travis, let's move on to leadership. So we've only been chatting for less than 30 minutes, and I can tell you've got your head screwed on with all of this. I'm already really impressed. But you weren't always a leader, right? You have to get taught through experience. I don't know, have you got a time in your life where you learned the most in that? Like everybody makes mistakes. Was there a time in your life where you learned how to be a leader?
Yeah, for me, I feel incredibly lucky from a young age that I had mentors lean in and really help foster that type of leadership. Most of them were teachers, band directors, so on and so forth. And that really instilled within me this mentality that I can be a leader. And part of being a leader is showing up in a way that is inspirational to others. And I remember in 9th grade, I was an absolute terror. I would speak out of turn. I would, I was just very rambunctious. And a teacher pulled me in the hallway and said, "Travis, you have influence. And it's up to you whether you want that influence to be good or bad. You have that choice." And that was a life-changing moment for me. That really set me on this journey of I want to have good influence. And I think that has really been embedded in my leadership style since. And then throughout the years in my professional career, I've been very fortunate to have fantastic bosses, who have been inspirational, who have taught me everything from how to have difficult conversations to the importance of speaking up and not letting something, get swept under the rug. And that has only fostered improved leadership over the years as well. And now in my role, I always encourage my team for us to have a continuous feedback loop. There will absolutely be times when I mess up. I don't make the right decision. I speak out of turn. I don't totally have context, and I'm making a decision that someone disagrees with. And I always encourage the team to speak up in those instances. Come to me and inform me how I can be better. And I think that is really rooted in that growth mindset and being okay with discomfort and knowing that I'm not always going to nail it. And the only way for me to improve is when I'm okay with that discomfort and I open that door to people to give me feedback.
Awesome. I love that. Well, that sounds amazing. It sounds amazing that you had mentors throughout your life that were able to show you that. One thing that we found was a common pain point between a lot of the SEOs that we chat to was so obviously we're a recruitment company, so people are coming to us when they're trying to look at other roles, and we always try and find out like what was it from your current role that kind of like we can look forward to make sure it's not in the same other role. And it was never the company was bad, this, that, or the other. It was always poor management. So I think, Travis, consider yourself very lucky that you had those leadership qualities and mentors. But moving on to mentors then, what advice would you say to give to maybe a junior to medium level SEO to go out and get mentors? Because it's something we talk a lot about. I've had mentors throughout my life that the growth is just exponential when you've got somebody that's where you want to be in 15, 20 years. So what advice would you give on mentors?
Yeah. Number one is build a relationship with that person naturally. I have had people approach me who don't know me, but for a day, or who don't know me other than LinkedIn, to say, hey, I want you to be my mentor. And that's very, very off-putting. So I do not recommend that, right? I think the slow burn, if you will, of building that relationship over time is very, very valuable. So that looks like, creating comments on their LinkedIn, sending them a message just saying, hey, great post, really enjoyed this. Have you thought of it this way? Having those types of soft touches to slowly build that relationship over time can really build a much better and lasting relationship over time. I've also seen this done at conferences. I've seen people walk up to others and say, oh, I want you to be my mentor. I love you. It's the very first time they're reading that person. So, the way I look at it is my goal in most of my communication is to continue that conversation in some way or another. And eventually that will lead to robust mentorship. But that shouldn't be the goal right out of the gate. The goal should be, what's the next angle for which I can interact with that person? And when you do that enough times, it builds up that relationship to where you're ultimately able to ask that person to be a strong mentor for you.
Awesome. And just Daris, just before you go on that one, just more of a fun question from me then. So Travis, you're kind of at the top of your game in terms of the SEO. You're working for one of the biggest media agencies in the world. Do you still look for a mentor?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I am learning. I had a chat with my boss yesterday to I've been at Brainlabs 2 years, and I said, you're great. I've learned so much from you, but I think I'm ready to find someone else within the organization that I can learn new skills from. And it's always important to have that deep bench of mentors, people you can learn from, people you trust, people you can go to for advice. So yeah, it's, and even extending outside of work, having people where you can go to them and say, do I really still want to be in the corporate world, or, should I quit my job and go start an ice cream shop? Having mentors help guide you through those types of life decisions is very, very valuable. So yes, always have a deep bench of mentors, and it'll ebb and flow. There have been times when I've had almost too many mentors and I get what I would call feedback whiplash, where, they're all saying different things about a topic and it's really hard to make a decision. Then there have been times in my life when I don't really have a solid mentor and I'm actively seeking one. So I think at any point it's really important to just keep a pulse on that and aim for who those people are. But always start with your own network. Very few people do not have at least one person in their life who they can lean on for some type of growth that they're ultimately trying to achieve. I think people typically try to look outbound for that, when a lot of times that person is probably already within your circle in some way.
I love that. And the reason I asked that was I've chatted to a lot of people that are at the top of their game, and ego normally comes into play, where it's like, well, what has somebody else got to teach me? But I don't know if you know Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Yes,
he's got one of my favorite things I've ever read from any book is in his first book, 12 Rules of Life. He has a chapter called "You Should Always Talk to Somebody as If They've Got Something to Teach You." And that like completely gave me a paradigm shift. And yeah, I feel like it just opens your eyes that like anybody in any different walk of life has something to teach you. Might not be for your career or something, but yeah, I love that. Okay, I'll stop talking about mentorship. Something I'm very passionate about. Darius, you can ask your question.
No, we touched on it briefly throughout like the onboarding process, and obviously you moving roles between W Promote, Booyah, and now obviously the Brainlabs. But I chat to a lot of SEOs, obviously from junior level right up to sort of SEO directors. What is one piece of advice you would give somebody moving from a junior role into their first management role to sort of incorporate within their first 90 days?
This was a lesson hard learned from me. And the biggest piece of advice I have is listen. I think a lot of times someone can be very eager to get into leadership or a management role. They get into that role. They immediately want to change things. They immediately start barking orders. And I think it's really important for your first 2 to 3 months to just listen. Ask questions, understand the pain points, understand the processes, understand what that ultimately looks like. That means sitting in on a pitch. That means, understanding your company's services and products inside and out. And going to chat with the engineering team, the head of content, so on and so forth, to really understand their motivations, their goals, what makes them tick. And when you're able to have that approach, everything you build after that is so much better because it has context and it's aligned with everyone's goals. It's aligned with the business and the ways of working that are already in place. And it's just a lot more informed. And that leads to much better outcomes for you to ultimately achieve things a lot faster in the long run. So even though those first 2 to 3 months, it's not going to seem like you're making a lot of change, you'll easily catch that up with the progress you're able to make at the first year mark than you would if you immediately went in and started to make uninformed changes.
Awesome. And so Travis, we chat to a lot of companies where, let's just say they've got a budget on salary wise, right? So we go in, we create something we call the golden recruitment formula, which is we go in and we just basically take everything from their business to make it as attractive as possible to show to candidates. But we also find out, I feel like job descriptions are dead today. They're just, I don't know how anybody gets excited over somebody looking at a job description. It's insane. So we go in and we ask like the company owner or somebody that's been there for a long time of like what the company culture is like, who they'll be reporting to. We put in like an actual team, like map of who's there, LinkedIn URLs, how they celebrate employee success, a whole list of things just to give them more idea. But one of the biggest selling points we have with SEOs right now is, and again, it works with SEOs. We chat to a lot of them that aren't necessarily just motivated by money. They want to know where they'll be in 3 to 5 years time. So a career roadmap. And that's one of the biggest selling points we've had on any client. And I seen a video today of you talking about bringing people into Brainlabs and you've seen their lives transform. So if there's any agency owners or company owners, could you give us some advice on basically, there's companies out there that don't have career roadmaps. We've been on calls recently where we've said, well, where can somebody be in 3 years time? Oh, well, we're trying to figure that out. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but
sure.
What advice would you give to somebody to build a career roadmap and sell that idea?
Yeah. To be fair, this is something that Brainlabs has improved over the last 2 years. I don't think we're 100% there, but we are certainly headed in the right direction and getting better. So I can speak from both perspectives of I'm in those shoes. When 2 years ago I was on interviews, interviewing people and was asked that same question, and my response was, I don't know. And today I feel really confident in my response being that, anyone who comes into Brainlabs, crushes it, will absolutely move up, 1 or 2 tiers within a few years. And that can be very, very meaningful. Step number one of a career growth map is always going to be rooted in the employee's desire. And I think a lot of emphasis gets placed on the employer and a lot of emphasis gets placed on the manager, but it takes two to tango. And it's really important for any individual to think about where they want to be and to uncover what types of questions they need to be asking through that interview process to really make sure that that company is aligned with their type of career growth. So that's a big caveat to all of this. On the employer side, it's really about forecasting and mapping out, what needs to happen in order for this team to move up. And in our case, as an agency, that means more new business needs to come in order for there to be a business need for these people to move up. We hire under them, yada, 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 so on and so forth. So being able to forecast that out as an organization is very, very valuable and very important. You can even do that in-house, right? What revenue threshold needs to be reached in order for you to make a new addition to your marketing team? How many new products need to be launched per year in order to justify that brand new hire, right? So just going through that exercise is not only beneficial from a career growth perspective, but also from a business perspective. So then you aren't playing catch up and you don't really know when you need to make that next hire. So there's lots of benefits in going through those types of forecasting exercises. And I think that's one way and one area that I've really leaned in over the last 2 years at Brainlabs is how can we improve our forecasting exercises so that can help us plan for career growth, and that can help us plan for business growth, and so on and so forth.
I love that. We have a client that we've been working with for just over a year now, and it's finding SEOs in the UK and then moving them down to Australia to their office, right?
Oh, cool.
And on the first call I had of that, I was like, because you're not talking about people that are just out of university or juniors. You're talking about people like in the middle of their career, right? Like most probably have houses and mortgages and all this. And anyway, then we went through everything that we could to make it attractive, and they had a career roadmap. And it's the single thing that like we've placed Daris, 6 or 7 people there in the last year now, like packed up their stuff down to Australia because of this career roadmap. Wow. And it's exactly what you said. It's like the whole forecast. If you hit this revenue goal, these KPIs, then you jump this salary, you get this title, and here's where you could be in 5 years' time. And it's just a complete game changer. And I love that. So Travis, at the minute, Brainlabs are hiring for quite a few positions. How are you finding the quality of the SEO job market right now?
Yeah, we are hiring a soccer team. Literally, we have 11 SEO positions open right now between the US and the UK. I would say in general the SEO talent out there is very, very strong right now. The unfortunate part of that is that's because quite a few smaller agencies have closed, or in-house teams have contracted. But from a hiring perspective, we are seeing very, very high quality candidates who just know their stuff in and out. For a long time, we would find candidates that only know one type of SEO. Maybe they're really good at content SEO. Maybe they're really good at technical SEO. What we're seeing today, and I think this is just natural with the maturity of the industry, is people know full stack SEO. And they're really proficient in all forms of that. And that is a very attractive hire as an agency because that person is really able to be adaptable in a way that we didn't see even 3 to 5 years ago in the talent pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's one thing that we find as well. So I think everything goes in booms and cycles, and I think what we found when ChatGPT and stuff came out is that everybody got scared. And I feel what's happened is everybody's got scared, but used the scared mindset to go in and train themselves up and bring it back. But like even another thing was, one thing I've noticed is that a lot of SEOs I used to be on the phone for, they were just lazy and they weren't like really trying. And I feel like, especially the last few months, like we get on the phone with people and like the enthusiasm is through the roof and this and that. And yeah, again, I think everything comes in booms and cycles, but yeah, that's great to hear. Go ahead.
Yeah, just on that note, when ChatGPT first came out, to your point, there was so much fear. And I think a year later, almost to the week, we're able to see that, look, SEO isn't going anywhere. It's just changing form. And when you have that type of confidence in where the industry is going, I think that really reinvigorates a lot of people. I remember a year ago, I was having very tough conversations, usually with more junior SEOs who were like, oh my gosh, did I choose the wrong career path? Is this not for me? Am I going to be out of a job in a few years? And I think the reality is entry-level SEO roles will look dramatically different in 2 to 3 years than they do today. But for anyone who's been in the game and has seen all sorts of forms of SEO, starting with the traditional 10 blue links on the Google page, evolving to YouTube SEO, and then App Store optimization and Amazon SEO, right? Like there's always a place for SEOs. So it's really just a matter of leaning into where that audience is, and again, being okay with discomfort and embracing that type of learning moving forward.
And talking about being scared, sorry, Daris, I know I feel like I'm on a roll here. But talking about being scared about ChatGPT, a lot of people are scared of SGE. What's your thoughts on that?
What's really interesting to me is I don't know. To me, there are much bigger threats out there than SGE. I think TikTok search is a much bigger threat than SGE today. I think the way consumers are changing their preferences from reading to watching videos, or more audio focused content, that is a much bigger threat to Google in my eyes than something like Gen AI entering the scene. I will say it's obviously going to have an impact, just like featured snippets had an impact. But again, in any setting, there is a world where you can still play and dominate in that space. And we're already working on SGE threat analyses and being able to test into SGE so we can influence what those results look like. So I think, again, as long as you're okay with discomfort and you keep a pulse on what's ultimately happening, it's just it's more job security. And as people really become experts in these new forms of search, that type of that creation of the niche generates even further demand in my mind than not. So yeah, I think it's a very exciting time, and I'm more bullish than I am scared at this point.
I love that answer. I love that. All right, Daris, go on. You can have your last question.
No, you mentioned there previously just about reassuring sort of junior level SEOs. How have you had to sort of adapt your leadership style when it comes to managing obviously a lot more senior SEOs, like account directors and stuff like that, compared to sort of graduates or entry level SEOs?
It's very, very different. The conversations become less about, hey, what tool do I go to for XYZ, and more about how do I inspire my team? How do I communicate this really difficult idea to this client in a compelling way? And that type of mentorship requires a lot more clarity and thought, and requires you to do mental exercises that are much more difficult to build process around. So that means, more frequent one-on-ones. So with any senior level folks, I stitch up with them on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, whereas junior folks, it's more on like a quarterly basis for me, but more frequent for their line manager. and really being able to have structure in those types of conversations where you can. So it makes the more complex conversations have space and have time to tackle those together. I think the other thing is always being available for those senior level folks. A lot of the challenges they experience can't totally wait. It's usually like, big contract questions or team issues or that type of stuff, where if we let it fester even for an extra day, that could have dire consequences, on the outcome. So always being available for the team is really important. And I always have an open calendar policy with generally most people, but I would say especially for senior level folks on the team.
Awesome. So look, Travis, we won't keep you any longer. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Honestly, this has been one of my favorite ones we've done. I've had so many ideas that you've said that I know could help our audience in terms of SEOs looking for roles or just the industry in a whole. So honestly, man, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Travis, where can people find you if they want to get in touch and ask you if you can be their mentor?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is the best bet. That's my favorite social platform. And thank you both for reaching out, for having me. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And please, if you're ever in Denver, let me know. I would love to meet up. And we can find a better restaurant than Subway.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to end the recording.